तत्परम्पर्याय विद्महे ज्ञानलिङ्गेश्वराय धीमहि तन्नो गुरुः प्रचोदयात्। Everyone, welcome to Songs of the Heart, heart-to-heart conversations with mentors of the Gitananda Yoga family, Rishiculture, Ashtanga Yoga. Today, I'm delighted to welcome our beautiful Yogacharini Kalavathi Devi. Namaste, Kalavathi.
Namaste, Sangeeta.
Namaste. And where to start with Kalavathi? Kalavathi has been learning with and from the family of the Bhavanani, of Yogacharya, Dr Ananda Bhavanani, and our beloved Shri Meenakshi Devi Bhavanani at the ashram since a very long time, and is one of a very sincere and a very dedicated Yogacharini. She has earned the title of Yogacharini and earned the title of Yogacharya and earned the title of Karma Yoga Shiromani. All of these titles reflect the dedication that Kalavathi Devi has had and offered to the Parampara since the 90s. Kalavathi is currently teaching and has been teaching foundational courses as well as yoga teacher trainings and residential retreats, and is often traveling to the ashram to support students who travel from around the world to study at the ashram. So let's welcome Kalavathi. This is just a tiny, tiny, tiny introduction to the width of Kalavathi's life and work. So the question I have for Kalavathi, the first question I have about the Nada yoga practices from our Parampara is, why did you choose Om Studio as the name of your studio?
Okay, there's a story to this one because it was never meant to be Om Studio at all. So when I built the studio, I had designed I would call it a kolam, but it's on the wall and most people call it a mandala, and people over here wouldn't know what a kolam is. So a kolam is a pattern on the floor made out of rice and coloured rice, which I absolutely love kolams and jump at the opportunity to create one whenever I can. But this was a painted version on the wall because obviously having a rice powdered version on the floor of a studio just wouldn't work. So I've got this beautiful design on the wall, which people would call a mandala. So using yantra and coming up with a name for the yoga studio, and I was checking things with Dr Ananda, we actually worked out that I think it was the Mandala Yoga Center gave really good business numbers, yantrically, and that was what it was going to be called. It's going to be called the Mandala Yoga Center. But what happened was the entrance to the studio is on a lane, just on the studio's at the back of my house. Okay, so I walk down my garden to it. Everybody else comes via a lane off the streets behind my house. So when we first built it, it was like a big garage, and it had a big roller shutter door, and the builders had to take this big door out and brick it up. So they put the concrete over the brick. So it was just this huge blank concrete wall on a lane, which just didn't stand out or anything. So when people were first coming, it was, tricky for them to find it. So I just grabbed a tin of paint and just did a really big Om on the wall. So at least there was something easy for people to find. And everyone started calling it the Om. And so then I looked yantrically at it and worked out that Om Studio gave kind of the same numbers as the same yantric energy as the Mandala Yoga Center. So it went from that to Om Studio. So it wasn't intentional. It was just this random painted Om so that people could find me.
And yet at the same time, it works perfectly because it's such a blessing and such an auspicious,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, bija mantra to have right there. And
Yeah.
so you have been learning and teaching in this parampara for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember your first experience, or just one of the first experiences of coming in contact with some of the Nada yoga practices of the parampara? Perhaps, the Pranava Om or mantra classes with Dr. Sir. What is one of your first memories or strongest memories that you like to share with us?
One of the strongest, I think, memories for me, was when I went up to Amaji once. It was actually because of learning Sanskrit. And I would struggle with Sanskrit because as an English speaker, all the sounds of the Sanskrit are very different to English. So there was ICYER, who was training with me, was a French speaker. So your A's, for an English person, we would say ah, where they would say ah, so she had so many of the sounds already ready to her, just naturally. And I can remember out of, my group, I was the one that struggled most with the Sanskrit, getting my mouth around and my head around these different sounds. You could say them, when you're repeating, just a sound, but to actually be able to read the Sanskrit, when we were in class and we did the satsanga in the evenings, Amaji would often have us read from the handouts that she would give us. And I can remember struggling so much with the Sanskrit words. And I can remember saying to Amaji once, I don't have a problem when it comes to singing it. When I'm speaking it, I struggled. But when we sang it, in whether it's chanting, whether it was bhajans, I had no problem at all. And that's when Amaji told me that Sanskrit used to be sung, not spoken. And I remember her saying that to me, and that was it was just really interesting. There's the fact that the natural way is for it to be sung. That was its original form, and that I found very natural. I remember the mantra classes with Dr Ananda. We didn't do, I think his repertoire of the mantras that he teaches now has hugely expanded, from when I was there. I don't remember doing the Patanjali Yoga Sutras back then. That's something that's come in more recent years. And the the length of his mantra class has changed as well. It's kind of gone from an hour to at least an hour and a half, probably longer, knowing Dr. Ananda. But I used to love the mantra. I love chanting mantra. The bhajans were, for me, something very interesting because somewhere in my youth, I had lost the courage, I suppose, to maybe sing in public. I think I was, something happened that stopped me from singing happily in front of people. As a child, I wanted that leading part. I wanted to sing. I didn't want to be in the background. I wanted to have that leading part. But when I was in my sort of young adult life, I wouldn't have wanted that part. And I can remember going to the ashram knowing that I was going to have to sing and thinking, okay, this could be, the thing that sorts out, singing for me, which it was, because, back then we had to sing. We had to lead the bhajans. Nobody got away with it. I think people get away with it these days. But when I went, you didn't get away with anything. You had to do.
Not really.
No, they do. They have done.
We'll have to change that then.
Sorry?
We'll need to change that back to how it was then.
Absolutely.
I think the only reason why, I say this is that I think I find, as a voice teacher and someone who works with the voice a lot, I find that it's so important for humans to be encouraged to voice their emotions, to voice their intellect in a way that is melodious, like a singing. Because there's something about the singing voice that is quite vulnerable, while the speaking voice can be performed according to our identity formation. The singing voice, yes, we're not talking, professional singers, but just people who, like us, who have just come to the ashram and try to sing a very powerful chant, like a mantra, and also a song that has been sung, like a bhajan, a hymn that have been sung for generations. And there's that moment where you overcome the embarrassment of being so vulnerable, not just because of singing, but also because of singing a song from a different culture in the original culture. And I think there's something very beautiful that happens there for a personal growth. It's very humbling and it's very empowering. And saying no to that experience precludes one from having a breakthrough in one's growth, So do you find that with your students? Do you, now because you teach mantra classes and you love singing and you share your singing, do you find that hesitation in your students? And when you do that, how do you encourage them to continue with the study of these practices in the Gitananda tradition?
Yeah, you can always see people being hesitant, if it's new to them. But it's a cross experience, really, isn't it? Some people, have that hesitancy, whereas other people will just go for it. And that's different. And I think even the ones who are hesitant, if it's a one-off, then you're not really going to perhaps see them, go deeper into it and loosen up and, get a feel for it. But most of the time, because people are doing it regularly, as long as they can learn, the mantra, or, unless they've got the words in front of them, if you're, doing more of it, most people do loosen up and join in. I haven't really had people that wouldn't do it. Maybe they wouldn't, couple here or there that wouldn't do it on the first instance. But, they tend to, if they stick around, they definitely get over it. They have to. They have to get over it.
What is one of your favorite practices from our paramparai that involves sound, whether it's a pranayama or a particular mantra or the pranava pranayama? Is there one that, and by favorite, I mean, of course, one that you naturally go back to or practice that gives you inspiration or relaxation or both? Or is there one in particular?
I wouldn't say there's one in particular in that sense of the question that you're asking me, but something that I naturally just do, and it's something that I tend to do when I'm in my studio on my own, and that is just I think are they called the swaras in the, when you're learning the Carnatic music?
Yeah, the swaras, yes.
Yeah, I tend to just burst into song with those. The moment I lock the door and people have left, that's it. It's coming out of me, and I'm just playing around with those and singing those. And so those, for no reason, just burst out of me, very regularly. But with regards to actual practices, I love the pranava om. The mantra laya, I would really like to delve into. I remember feeling something very special with that when I did my training, but it's not something that, it's something that I need to do more of with Dr. Ananda in that kind of setting. And there's never, there's been a teeny dabble here or there with him, maybe something very quick, but not sort of like an extensive kind of program with it. So hopefully one day, that will become more of a practice. I do remember him on one of the first yoga retreats that I did when he was here. Probably was the first yoga retreat. And I'm not even sure exactly what we were talking about. He may have just ventured off onto, you know, the chakras. And the next thing I knew, and you've got this, you know, we had about 50 people there. And some were regular students, some were just random people that had just booked onto this, you know, yoga retreat because they'd seen it advertised. And I can remember he just suddenly decided he was doing the mantra laya, and he started chanting through the, yeah, I know, he just started chanting through the different bija mantras for the different chakras. And I can remember sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, you know, because when people know about this, you know what it is and you know what you're working with, but for the untrained ear, it can sound rather strange. I can remember sitting there thinking, the kitchen staff are just behind the hatch. You know, what are they going to thinking? Are they going to think we're some strange cult, you know, doing this strange chanting on this yoga retreat? But yeah, that's definitely something I would like to do more of and more in depth, because I had some really amazing, powerful experiences with that, you know, many years ago. But he always does that at the very end of the 6-month course, and I've gone back during the 6-month course so many times, but never at the end, you know, when he does it. So but I love the pranava om. I love chanting om. I had an amazing experience once chanting the mantra om. There's a yoga show that they do in London when they've been doing it for about 20 years now, a really big exhibition, you know, hundreds of stalls, hundreds of teachers teaching, thousands of people milling around. It's, you know, very not really yoga, you know, we're in this big exhibition centre. And I taught there for the first few years that it ran. I got kind of bored with it and didn't, you know, bother after the first few years. But whenever I would put an application in to teach there, I would think of something really different to do with people, because everybody was going to go and teach yoga. Everybody was going to go and teach an asana class. So I would always think of really different things to do, because you're going to stand out that way and more likely to get picked. So one time I put that I would teach people the pranava om. And the exhibition centre itself was this huge like warehouse venue. And the whole of downstairs was completely open. And then at the top, you had this sort of gallery that ran around the edge, and you could sort of look down onto the bottom. So you just had this sort of really massive platform that ran all the way around the outside on the next level. And I had been put there to teach the pranava om. So there must have been 50, 70 mats, something like that up there. And I had to have a microphone on and everything. I'd never had a microphone on before. And there were, about 50 or 70 mats, but double the amount of people. So they spilled everywhere. There was easily 100 or so people up there that had come to learn how to chant the mantra om. So we did a very quick hands-on breathing into all the different parts as I explained how to use the lungs and how to chant om properly. And then we went into it and did about 27 rounds of chanting om. And absolutely incredible. You know, there couldn't have been anybody in that whole building that didn't hear, because you had 100 or so people and me mic'd up chanting om. The vibration of it was so intense. And at the very end, so many people came up to me at the end. And I can remember one lady in particular, so thankful to me, because she said that she now understood the mantra om. She'd never understood it before, but now she understood it. And that was just, it was so incredible. And I can remember the energy and the vibration of that pranava om. Me and a handful of my students just stayed up on that platform for longer, just because you couldn't go off into that busyness downstairs. You just wanted to just be still in that vibration for a little while, before going off into the craziness of, shopping and yoga purchases and merchandise and what have you. So definitely the mantra om, the pranava om is very special to me, for sure.
Thank you so much for sharing such a beautiful image. I could actually see it. And something that I appreciate about your description is how tuning into this mantra, of course, thanks to the guidance of our Guru Parampara and our beloved Dr. Ananda, who's such an amazing musician as well as a yoga acharya and a doctor, is that we have, through Swami Gitandanda, we have inherited these practices that are both very clear in their physiological functioning. So you mentioned, the sectional breathing, and also they permeate our intellectual sphere, and they can calm our emotions, they can calm our minds and connect us to something greater. And to be able to do that in a busy setting like that, sometimes there's a hesitation, right, in thinking, especially outside of India or a guru kulam or a temple, is it appropriate or not to bring these practices outside? But I think when one is given the blessing from their guru, as you are in this paramparai, there's such an amazing benefit that people can receive from attuning to the power of these mantras. And now, always truly, but now more than ever, I feel that the power of sound, especially in this nada yoga practices, is that their efficiency is very swift. By breathing properly and by creating the vibration through the voice, we can calm the thought, the thinking process, the chitta vritti, quite fast, especially because there's so much noise in everybody's mind. Not everybody, but in a lot of people's mind, there's a lot of noise, and sound has that quality to entrain the thoughts and calm them. So thank you for sharing that so much. And I thank you so much for being in this very sweet and quick conversation, which I want to keep within about 20 minutes. So would you like to briefly share with us some of the classes that you teach? I will be sharing, of course, the link to your studio, but particularly for the ones who will see this video outside of our parampara, who may not know, just a few words perhaps on what you teach, how you teach it. You have retreats coming up and other classes. So anything that you would like to share with us regarding that?
Thank you. Yeah, no, all my classes are online because of COVID, and I think it's probably the way forward as well. I think even though restrictions have somewhat lifted, people are still quite wary. So some people are, staying online even if they just live around the corner. So it means that anybody anywhere in the world can join, which is, amazing. I've had people from Canada and New Zealand and all sorts of different countries. So yeah, my general classes, I teach in the same way that Amaji did. So I've always taught, that same routine that she stuck to. So it's a very sort of wholesome yoga practice, which takes you literally on a journey from the start to the end of the practice. But we do bring in, we obviously chant, the Gayatri mantra at the beginning and the universal prayer to close at the very end. But I do try and bring in things like Brahma Mudra and the Pranava Om regularly into class and get those little bits of sound in there. And they are, as you say, they are so useful for bringing that sort of relaxation element into the to the person, just as a way of expression, isn't it, which they might not be used to accessing. And in pregnancy as well, it's really, really useful in pregnancy. So I teach pregnancy yoga too, and I do yoga teacher training, but I do pregnancy teacher training as well. And one of the things that I encourage the people there to do is to get them to use the sound. because sound can be used in labour. And obviously, you know, most women make sound in birth, but if it's a positive sound where you're actually making a sound rather than a groan or, you know, a cry, you know, making a positive sound, you know, adds to that sort of what can be a really beautiful experience of giving birth. So yeah, one thing I did recently, which I hadn't done throughout sort of COVID, was I had attempted a bhajan class online. And actually it worked. I wasn't sure, you know, if it would work, but it did work, you know. So I was in the studio with some students and I had some online as well. And I really wanted to introduce them to, you know, the concept of bhajans. And yeah, it really worked. I was watching those online and, you know, they were sitting there tapping their hands as they were, you know, singing along, because the bhajans are done in a call and response way. And yeah, they were loving it, even though they were in their home, you know, whether they were on their own or not, I don't know. Family could have been in the next door thinking, what on earth's mum doing? But they were all going for it. They were singing and enjoying and moving, you know, to the music. And so nothing was lost. It was quite amazing, actually. I did wonder if they might maybe not really join in so much because somebody was in the next room or something. But no, actually, I was pleasantly surprised and it really worked. And yeah, I have a yoga retreat this weekend, and we're definitely going to be doing lots of mantra chanting and bhajan singing, because it's just so good for you. Yeah. Now, just a very quick, another lovely story about the Pranava Om, which just popped into my head. There was a one of the retreat centers that I use is a Buddhist center, and there was a Buddhist that used to own it, and he lived there. And there was this one time there was probably about 10 or 12 of us all in this room, and we were chanting the Pranava Om just round and round and round. And Swamiji's picture was by the side of me, and one of my good students was on the other side. His name was Jeremy. And at the end of the chanting, I said to him, I said, "Did you hear that extra voice?" And he looked at me and said, "Yeah, I heard it." And it was like, obviously Swamiji was between us, but you also had the Buddhist monk that used to live in that house, who died in that house, but there was an extra voice chanting Om with us. Maybe it was an extra voice that's just made from all the voices in that room that just resonated and created. It was a deep, low voice as well, but it was, yeah, very amazing. And other people heard it too. It was really interesting.
A beautiful story, because there's something about the overtones that, yeah, can reveal more than what is perceived by the senses, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Sangeeta.
Really, it's a real honor to listen to your stories, to learn with and from you. So I really thank you so much. And thanks everybody who have, you know, all of you who have stayed up until this point listening to our stories. All of the information on our beloved Kalavathi Devi are going to be found in the description of this video, together with the link to the studio. So check it out, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, Kalavathi. Pranam.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Loka samasta sukhinu bhavantu sarve janaha sukhinu bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti